The Barrow, Book 2, Blackheart, by Mark Smylie. Chapter 5. A Witch in An-Athair, the Arid World, the 17th of Ascensium. Stepan led Kulain Mol down a leaf-strewn forest path, the horse picking its way carefully over stone and branch behind him. Broad, high trees of birch and purple leaf oak, maple and elm, cherry and white ash, cedar and pine stretched out for leagues in all directions, covering the hills with their tall stands. Old layers of lichens and moss coated the trunks of the trees and the debris of the forested hillsides, and a rust-red underbrush complemented the ancient patina of greys and dull greens, while the leaves above were all the vibrant colors of spring in the great wood, their greens deep and verdant in contrast. He turned and looked to his left through a break in the trees and caught a glimpse of a far-sloping range of forested evergreen hills, backdropped by a horizon of desolate high snow-capped mountains. The great range of the Jar Edwins that stood between An-Athair and the highlands of Daraja. He was coming down eastward through the western reaches of the wood, now well off the Athair road that wended its way between the aisles of the great trees from the castle of Uth Mark to the castle of Hir and its bridge over the Erid Brae, and then on to the great castle of An-Athair itself. No visit home for him this time, had he still thought of the house where he had been born and raised as his home. He had not been back there except in his dreams for many a year. No, the rocky trail that he followed took him down into the hollows and thickets of deep, old forest, a particular and peculiar stretch of western An-Athair, known more for ruins and bandits than anything else. A handful of starlings swooped past him and settled on the lower branches of a great elm as he approached it. "You're quite lost," they called to him. "Am I, little lords?" he asked. You'll see, they called, and they took to wing. He followed the path and the flight of the disappearing starlings until they had passed beyond his sight. He could smell wet earth and leaf and needle, moss and sunlit stone, and from nearby the smell of something burning. He clambered up an outcropping that bounded the side of the trail, and leaned against a tree that clung precariously but firmly to the stones, its gnarled roots driving down through cracks in the rock. Peering between the trunks and branches of the thick trees, he caught glimpses of a slow, meandering creek down at the base of the hillside, and he could just barely make out a roof of thatch and a smoking chimney. "There," he called down to Kulain Mol. "I think that's where you'll get to stay a little while." The horse snorted. Stepan rowed the sturdy canoe softly, if at all, content to let the creek, one of the branches of the Bel Brae, carry him slowly south out of the stretch of hills and into the drowned vales of the Bel Bog. The canoe was marked with crude runes, hand-drawn marks of the Labira Grammata, to ward off danger and strengthen the hull, and someone had tucked a small bundle of wormwood branches and wren feathers beneath the forward seat as a ward against magic and ghosts and spirits. A prudent and effective folk charm. His leather satchels, bundles, pack, and weapons lay in the hollow of the canoe between his boots. A part of his mind was always focused on both the heaviest of his leather sachets and the hilt of his falchion propped on top of it. The great curved brass blade of the Golodriel was propped next to it, now secured in a leather scabbard made custom in Girdif. Not long before, he had seen on his right a great high spike of a hill crowned with the haunted ruins of old Bellaria, now perhaps a mile or two behind him, and an easy landmark visible anywhere in the bog save when mist hemmed in the traveller. The trunks of old trees thrust up out of the water and marsh grass, their long dead branches spindly ashen fingers as they reared above him. Light flooded in, now that the canopy of leaf was gone, but the bog held more menace than the dark wood that surrounded it. He floated past hilltop islands crowned with living trees, each a miniature world all to itself. On one island he spotted a white-tailed deer and her two fawn, staring at him as he drifted past. It was early in the season for the young, and he wondered for a moment about how they'd gotten to the isle, and if they were safe on it. He suppressed the instinct to intervene, reminding himself that the goddess and the keeper of animals were already watching over them. For a time, he paralleled a trail ridge that ran through the bog. The western woods were nominally part of the earldom of here, but even though the forest petered out soon and the more settled lands of Eridania were mere miles away, the woodfolk here, like the surly young couple that had provided him a canoe and agreed to host Culain Mall until his return, were none too beholden to the likes of earls and lords, even if they were fellow An-Athair. The edge of the wood bounded hills filled with old barrows, and with Bellaria looking down over all of them, there was a marked sense of deep and ancient gloom, ever-present reminders of the ill fortunes that had befallen their ancestors. But the woodfolk here still kept the trails clear, as a duty to old memories and dead queens, if not to living lords. Thankfully, they also tended to mind their own business. Stepan could have approached the bog from the south, coming up through the clear lands of Eridania, but he preferred his visits to be unremarked as possible. He was certain that the young couple homesteading on the creek would be friendly to the local bandits and might, under some circumstances, slip them a tip about a solitary traveler. But even if they didn't know who he was, and he had not volunteered his name, they certainly knew what he was, and he was reasonably confident that Culain Mall was in good hands, and there would be no surprise awaiting him on his return. He began to steer the canoe deeper into the bog, where the murky green waters were still, the oar breaking the placid, smooth surface of the mire with long ripples to announce his arrival. The birds and insects in his path fell silent at this rare intrusion of man and boat. A great vulture took to pertroop wings and circled high above him for a time before breaking off to the north. He watched it go, wondering who it might tell of his passage through the bog. The smell of the hearth fire came first, and then he heard a woman's voice raised in song in the distance. With the bog unnaturally silent, the effect was eerie, and Stepan felt a slight involuntary shiver up his spine. The singing, an old Athair lullaby, grew clearer as the canoe drafted through the murky waters, meandering through marsh grass and islands of dead and living trees towards the emergent shape of a small stone hut roofed with haphazard bark shingles on a lattice of sticks and twigs, a single chimney at its back to funnel the smoke out. The hut sat on a small isle that rose out of the last still pool before a rising trail ahead and high ridge that angled off to the south into the bog. The singing stopped as he pulled the canoe up by a pathway of stepping stones that jutted out of the water and led from the trailhead to the waterline before the hut's door. He waited for a moment, and then for a second time that day he called out in a quiet voice, "Hello!" in the cabin. The woman's voice came through the wooden door. "And who is it that approaches my home and seeks my consent to enter?" "It is Stepan, son of Arcante." Stepan did not steer in the canoe as the door opened into the darkness of the hut. A shape appeared in the doorway, barely visible in the shadows. Ah, Serpentelinga, the son of Argante, daughter of Branwen, scion of Arphane, and Urfante and Morphane, bearing a weapon forged in the 6 hills no less. The cursed woman's voice paused a moment before returning low and guarded. The cursed blade stays in the boat. Shaban bowed his head. Of course, Avaren. A starry cape, he thought, as he always did when he visited. He sat cross-legged on a small pillow set on the stone floor of the small but surprisingly comfortable hut. A small low table set in front of him and rushes covering the floor. Two wooden beds, one large and one small, were set on opposite sides of the hut and curtained for privacy. The smaller was a new addition from the last time he'd been here. The single door and a single small window pierced the stone walls, which had been covered in a riotous pattern of mosaic tiles in hues of green and light blue and silver, from which sprang shelves made of glittering metals and holding jars and bottles and metal boxes of herbs and powders and small bones and feathers and 100 other ends and odds. There was a loom and a locked wooden chest under the window, woven baskets, and a small painted cabinet next to the door. A fireplace filled the wall opposite the door, and he watched the woman puttering about it, stoking the flames higher to warm the steeping tea. The light from the fire sparkled off the myriad points of glistening metal and glass set in the walls. He had heard some woodsmen and even other magicians describe Avaren as old and grey, an ugly crone. Naera's Briarwood had assured him once, but the woman that stood before him appeared as ever to be an attractive An-Athair woman of middle years, marked with grace and the implied possession of wisdom. She was dressed in a long, full-length blue-black robe, faint patterns in silver trim visible at the cuffs and hems of sleeves and dress. Her dark hair was pulled up into a woven bundle and held with silver clasps and an amulet set with 3 small crystals. He knew her eyes were a piercing blue, unusual for an An-Athair, though she kept them turned quite deliberately away from his and focused on the work in front of her. The long fingers of her bejeweled hands worked with precision over kettle and cups. He will not hazard a guess as to what her true age or appearance or even her gender was. Such things ceased to matter for a witch or sorcerer of enough power, and not merely from a mastery of the incantations of glamour. As he watched Avaren, he felt other eyes watching him. 5 spirits, for sure, standing guard in the other world with golden spears, and another spirit of some kind manifesting as a black cat that was curled up in a basket and looking at him with one eye. He glanced to his left. A young boy of perhaps 5 or 6 years of age peered out from behind the curtain of the small bed. A Danyan child, pale in skin, with short dark hair and curious eyes and a shy smile. Not Avaren's child, then, this new arrival. An-Athair blood runs strong on the female side. A young ward, then, or a foundling? Shepman smiled back, and the boy hid. It is a matter of trust, really, Shepman said as he looked back to Avaren. When you find yourself in possession of something filled with a potential for great misuse, perhaps even evil, where does one's duty lie? What happens when you no longer trust those to whom you must bestow such a thing that is in your keeping? Avaren paused in her preparations, still not looking at him, as if considering his question. He thought he sensed a moment of tension in her shoulders, but then it passed. She's pondered this question before. The child is a ward, then, for sure. She finished setting 2 cups on a wooden tray and then placed the steeping kettle next to them. before bringing the whole display over to the small table. She sat across from him on another pillow, her legs tucked beneath her, and began pouring out their tea. "Is the corruption in our High King's court really so terrible?" "Oh, it's worse than you could possibly think. Far worse. But the court is not my concern in this case. It's the university, which I fear is too riddled with the adherents to the Black College." "I couldn't possibly know what the famed University of Therapoli needs with the swords forged in the Six Hills, but if you don't want to risk it in the hands of the Black College, then one less weapon in the world won't make a difference. The solution to your dilemma seems simple. Destroy it. Or you can climb to a high peak and just bury it beneath a rock, if you're willing to trust the fates and the Queen of Fortune." Avarin frowned and grew suspicious as she watched Shaban calmly sip his tea. "Is there something I'm missing? You hardly needed to come to me for help in destroying that cursed blade." "Ah," Shaban said with a slight smile. "You think I've been talking about the sword of the Golodriel? That is not, I'm afraid, the case at all." He set down his cup and reached into the satchel on the floor by his side. He removed a rectangular bundle of cloth warped shut and tied in twine. As he undid the warping, Avarin moved the tea tray off the low table. He placed the bundle on the table between them and slowly opened the cloth, revealing the book that lay inside. Avarin's eyes went wide, and the black cat in the basket arched its back up and it hissed, its fur standing straight up. Stepan was careful not to move. For a long moment Avarin did nothing but stare at the book. Its ancient parchment pages were bound between copper plates, with faint letters etched into the surface of the metal. Then, without taking her eyes from it, she slowly clapped her hands once. "Theowit, go play outside," she said quietly. The Danian boy opened the curtains and clambered out of his bed and stood with a surprisingly grim countenance on his small face. He didn't want to go. "Now," she said harshly, and the boy left in a small huff. Avarin let go her held breath, and then her face contorted in anger. "I should kill you for bringing such a thing into my house," she hissed. She looked up at him, fear mixed with the fury in her eyes. "Is this really what I think it is?" Stepan nodded. "My apologies, but yes, it is. The Libra de Secretum Maleferi de Nimargae, a book of confused and complicated provenance, a copy of a book that may never have existed. The Libra is an old Enduinan translation of the Codex Adancuresh, the so-called Book of Secrets, sometimes called the Book of the Dead, which is itself allegedly an old Golani translation of the Adure Malefiri Necris, the first book on black magic supposedly ever written, and by no less than Nimarga, the devil himself. No copy is recorded in history since the Golden Age. The Codex translation was purportedly by Mael Fes, who was but a mask of the devil to begin with, which means the devil wrote it once upon a time in Old Eduinan, then translated his own book into Golani, and someone else translated it back into Old Eduinan to sit now before us. Avarin snorted and made a warning sign in the air. "You're too causal with those names." The black cat growled its agreement. Stepan deferred his head and shrugged apologetically. He eyed the tome that lay like a great black weight between them. "I have read accounts by those that claim to have seen it, and they all swore this edition was undoubtedly translated by the Bacchus Regis, the mysterious author of the 4 books of Hermetic magic. And from what I saw, it's got his or her signature style and flair, as well as a hidden marker's mark, which appears to be a subtle variation on the marker's mark hidden in the 4 books. So by all appearances, the Bacchus Regis, or someone connected to the Regis, Had intended a fifth book, then, to place black magic alongside alchemy, mirror magic, the magic of stones and charms, and astrology in the orders of sorcery. This copy was discovered and stolen by Lay Miradim from the library at the university when he was still a magister there. And now, come by means mysterious into your hands to pollute my humble adobe with its presence, Avarin said, looking at him with slits for eyes. Hardly mysterious. I and some others have been waiting for this book to reappear for years, and took great risks and great pain to make sure it did so, Stepan said with a sigh. A lot of people died to see this back in the world, and now that I've found it, I can't return empty-handed claiming failure. The risk in that lie is too great. Someone is bound to guess the truth. He leaned forward, speaking quietly. In a way, we were lucky. Lai was a maverick and a wild card even amongst his fellow nameless, and working a plan of his own making to wreak a great doom upon the world. I fear that if the Libra is returned to the university library, this time it will simply fall directly into the hands of the Black College itself. They are embedded too deep among the magisters these days. They will steal it once it is returned. I am certain of that. Avarin watched him carefully. And so you have a plan that requires my help? Stepan paused, then opened up a second larger bottle that sat by him upon the floor. He placed 3 copper-bound books of parchment upon the low table, each the same size and thickness as the Libra de Secretum Malefiri de Nimargae. 3 blank books, hastily but most expertly made to order by Arabus, a scribe of the Girdif Guild of Letters, of almost the exact same size and parchment weight of the original, he explained. The idea is that each is to be transformed by a glamour into a copy of the Libra, perfect in almost every detail, except each will only contain 1 in 3 true words from the original text, with the true words divided equally into each copy and mixed with false words through a cipher. Avarin barked a laugh. You are too clever, just like your mother. So 1 book becomes 3, and unless all 3 books are together, and the cipher understood cannot be read. Stepan nodded. That's the theory, at least. Divination or incarnation will see the book as real, as an edition of the Libra, and each truly is a copy, just terribly incomplete. You know, a powerful magician will still be able to see through the glamour, given enough time, and a truly powerful one might see the fake right away. No doubt. So I will have to take a chance with some of those I intend to show the copies, said Stepan. But the cipher will slow him, or her, if not leave them stymied completely. A cipher can't be solved with magic, only with knowledge or reason or luck. And they'd still need all 3 copies, even once they understood the trick. Avarin leaned back from the low table onto her heels for a moment, half closing her eyes and mumbling to herself. Her eyes fluttered open and fixed on Stepan. If I do this, the ritual will be at painful cost, and we will have to find a source of great power to fuel a glamour of such complicity and disguise the evidence of the magic work. She thought for a moment. We will have to take a great climb up to Bel Aria and call upon the ghosts and unquiet dead there. Their anger and despair will give me the strength to do the making such as you seek. Painful cost is no stranger to me, but an old friend. Name your price. Stepan smiled pleasantly. Avarin laughed a cold, bitter laugh and stood to look down at him. Oh, Blackheart, there is a price for this, a high, high price. But it is a price that cannot be paid in gold or in gems, in lands or wealth or worldly pleasure. No, if I do this thing for you, you will owe me 3 times thrice your weight in spirits and blood and death, payable during your life or after in the underworld. Stepan stood up slowly and bowed his head to her, his lean, smiling face calm and placid, even as his eyes filled with a grim eagerness. Consider me your servant. The black cat hissed again.